so hopefully in a second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagranagunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagranagalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha Umagyanati Mirandasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Namo Maya Kre Radhe Vrindavanishari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripri Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Varamanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Nama Eva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva Gatiranyata. Dear devotees, welcome again, Brajasundari, Mohan, Omkar, Shraddha, and Shamananda. Even though I only see your names, it's still wonderful to have your association. Narottam sings Tarpan Mora Vaishnaviranam. My libations of water to the ancestors and the gods are the names of the Vaishnava. So just reciting Shraddha, Brajasundari, Madan Mohan, Omkar, Shamananda. It's a holy act in itself. Today, I spoke, going one verse after another will only take about 18,000 times. The second verse, along with the first and the third, they form a kind of a whole on their own. And they present a complete introduction to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The story of the Srimad-Bhagavatam properly begins in the fourth verse. So the first three are a kind of Mangala Acharana or auspicious invocation. And just as it is said by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that there are different kinds of Mangala Acharanas. Some that offer respects to the deity of the text, some that pray for auspiciousness, and some that give a summary of the text. In the same way, the Srimad-Bhagavatam's invocation, these first three verses, can also be seen as embodying all of these three types of Mangalacharan. The first verse, of course, if any of you attended that class, you might remember that the first verse is very long and very complicated, extremely philosophical. And philosophical in such a way that commentators such as Vishwanath Chakravarti can tease out 6 or 7 different meanings out of it. The second verse is not quite as complicated, but it still offers quite a bit of things to meditate upon and think about. It goes like this in Sanskrit. Ujita kaita utrapa nirmapstra yonmulanam Srimad-Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Vaparayirishvara Sadyo Ridyavadyudyate Trakritibhis Sushrushrubhis Tatkshana. And Srila Prabhupada, he translates the verse in this way. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is a reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. So, about matter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, or what we could call the Sambandha, or philosophical background. But it also says something about abhidheya, or the practice of bhakti. So let us try to go through the verse in some detail. The first line says, Dharma projita kaita votra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. Let's begin with the first half. Dharma projita kaita votra. Atra means here. And as we will notice, this word atra is repeated twice in this verse. Repeating a verse like this is not considered a good style by Sanskrit poeticians. So when it is done, it is either done by carelessness, because of a sloppy writer, or then by purpose, in order to bring across a point exactly by breaking the rules. Anyone who knows about rules, oh, it says that I'm breaking up. I'll try to see if I can. Anyway, I'm hoping it will be better now. Anyone who knows anything about rules knows that rules are important, but it's just as important to know when to break the rules. And if you're a person who always follows the rules, when you go and that one time break the rule, everyone is going to notice it. If a truck driver swears, will not notice anything, and I'm using it in a stereotypical way, the term now. But if a saint will swear, then everybody will be like, oh, now he's really upset or something. So here, Vyasadeva, he's repeating the word atra twice for emphasis. Atra means here. So here, in this scripture, only here, only in this, the things that he's going to mention will be found. So he's really kind of catching our attention and trying to place it here on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So here, dharma projita kaitava. So all kind of cheating dharma is projita, it's thrown away. Ujjita or given up. Pra-ujjita or projita. Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti, they both comment that this means that even those dharmas that aim at liberation, which usually in the dharmic traditions is seen to be the fourth and ultimate goal of life, even that kind of dharma is rejected in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Sometimes it's easier to understand something by contrasting it with something else. If the only Purana you've read is the Srimad-Bhagavatam, you know how special a Purana the Srimad-Bhagavatam is. All other Puranas are full of this kind of dharma. If you go to this holy place and you give donations to the Brahmins, there's so many chapters about this in, let's say, the Varaha Purana, then you're going to go to heaven for 10,000 years, and you're going to have amazing sex life, and you're going to have plenty of well-behaved children, and all these kind of really material benefits. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, this is projita, this is thrown away. The Srimad-Bhagavatam, it really doesn't focus on these kind of things, not even on liberation. So dharma, or virtue, or a good life can be understood in so many different ways. Srila Prabhupada speaks in his purport about the need to create a human society which is fair, which is economically viable, and all of these important things. But the Srimad-Bhagavatam goes beyond all of this. This is the can be quite people. So the person who has the adhikara, or the eligibility, or the ability to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam, is a person who is nirmatsara. That means a person who is without envy, or a person who is without checking here how Vishwanath was saying it. He just says without selfish motivations, but it's basically the same thing. A person who is without the tendency to see himself or herself as the center of the universe, such a person can actually understand the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam speaks here about nirmatsaranam satam. A sat means a person who is established in authentic being, to use the phrase of Srila Satyanarayana Das Babaji. A person who is a real person, an authentic person. We're all more or less caught up with pretense, with pretending to be something that we are not. But a person who is real, who is not covering himself or herself by these different masks that most of us use, and who, more than that, also is free from selfishness and free from envy. Such a person can understand the Srimad-Bhagavatam in its entirety. So does that mean then that there's no hope for a person like me, who am not neither a sat nirmatsara sat, neither authentic, free from envy? There is some benefit from the Srimad-Bhagavatam for even me, and there are some things that even I can understand, but I will not be able to understand everything in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The verse goes on to say that here, again, atra is vastava vastu. Vedyam vasta vastu. That's how the second line begins. Vastu in Sanskrit means something that is real and something that has an essence. Let's say, for example, that I walk on a path in the forest, and I see a snake in front of me on the ground, and I go like, "Oh no, a snake!" But then I look more carefully, and I see it wasn't a snake; it was just the root of a tree that was going across the path. So in that case, the snake wasn't real; it wasn't a vastu; it was just an illusion or a superimposition on my fears, and my thoughts about the snake made me see a snake in the root. So it wasn't a real; it wasn't the vastu of a snake. So some things are real, some things are illusions. And surprisingly, many things are actually illusions. We have very illusory views, for example, of ourselves. I, for example, having grown up with a father who was a very, very hardworking person, I know somewhere instinctively that I'm a very lazy person. Others may not agree, but I really think that I'm a lazy person. It's not a very real understanding, perhaps, but emotionally, that's where I am. So my understanding of myself is not very correct. And the same is true for most of us. We may think that we are lazy, we may think that we are hardworking, we may think that we are smart or stupid or pretty or ugly. Usually we are not very accurate in assessing ourselves. Neither are we very accurate in assessing other people or this world. We make mistakes not only about snakes and roots, we make mistakes about how to invest our time, how to invest our emotions, and so on and so forth. So the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it deals with vastu. It deals with realities. It doesn't get bogged down in all of the things that our mind may like, but that will actually not be beneficial for us. Because that's another meaning of the word vastu. It's something that is real, but also something that actually has some point, some meaning in life. And the Srimad-Bhagavatam deals with vastu, but it deals not only with that, but with vastava vastu. The reality of reality, or the truly real. Out of everything that is existing, the one existence that lends its existence to everything else. When I was a very new devotee, one person told me, our temple president, he said that actually it's more certain that Krishna exists than that you exist. And when he said it, it kind of sounded cool, but I didn't really understand what he meant. But only much later I understood. The idea is that existence or sat is not something that is to be taken for granted. Existence, there doesn't have to be an existence. Like the physicists are thinking about the time before the Big Bang. It's not that there was an empty universe. There wasn't a universe. There wasn't space. So existence in itself comes from the existent Godhead. Krishna shares his existence with the world and with the jivas, just like he shares his consciousness and his bliss. He is Sat Chid Ananda. So the real reality, or the existent existence, is the very fountainhead of reality, the very fountainhead of existence. That is Krishna. And this is the topic of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the vastava vastu, the reality behind all other seeming realities, or reality is Shiva. If you want to call Maheshwara, you can also take it like that. Krishna and Shiva are always connected with each other. It's one understanding of one of the Namaparads is to think that Shiva and Krishna are entirely different from each other. But generally, Acharyas understand Shivadam here to mean it gives auspiciousness. And auspiciousness in the sense, of course, of the highest auspiciousness, not just auspiciousness in the sense of good luck or better weather tomorrow or something like that, but auspiciousness in the sense of bhakti. Engaging with the Srimad-Bhagavatam will rub off bhakti on us. And this auspiciousness is then contrasted in the last part of the second line. Tapatrayonumoolana, unmoola, and tapatraya means the three sufferings: suffering from the self, from the body and the mind, suffering from other living beings, and suffering from nature. These three types of suffering, they are uprooted by the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Uprooted means that the Srimad-Bhagavatam doesn't simply take away suffering right now, or maybe alleviate it a little bit, but it deals with the problem from the root. And now we could ask ourselves, we've been reading the Srimad-Bhagavatam for years, and still we're suffering sometimes like anything. So what kind of talk is this? The idea, of course, is that just like if you want to uproot a weed in your garden, you have to do some work. Similarly, engaging with the Srimad-Bhagavatam is not something that we just do once. We just listen once to the Srimad-Bhagavatam and everything is taken care of. It may happen like that. There are stories like that. But those are, of course, extreme cases. In most cases, we need to dive into this text again and again and let our consciousness be bathed by the words of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. In the third line, Srimad-Bhagavatam, that means the great sage or Vyasadeva, when he has composed this Srimad-Bhagavatam, what use is there of others? Kim va parair? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has famously said that if all the books of the world would be lost, or maybe it was Bhaktivinoda, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was. Maybe, yeah, it was Bhaktivinoda, I think. In his Bhagavad speech, he said, if all the books of the world were to be lost, but the Srimad-Bhagavatam would be saved, not that much would actually be lost. That's a scary thought to me, that all the books of the world would be lost. But at least there would be one very excellent book left for us to study. A person like me who likes to read many books is, of course, hampered by the fact that when I read many books, I don't read the books very carefully. I go from one book to another, like a bumblebee going for new nectar from new flowers, instead of going deep into the one book. I think it would be very good for me if I would be stranded on a desert island with only the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And this is what the verse here says. Srimad-Bhagavatam Bhagavate Mahamuni Kim va parair? Now that we have the Srimad-Bhagavatam, what use is there of other books? Of course, there is some use of other books as well. We do read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Srimad-Bhagavatamrita, the Gita, and all these other Bhakti Shastras. But the Bhagavatam really is the main book of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Srimad-Bhagavatam Pramana Mamalam. Srimad-Bhagavatam is the unsullied or the completely pure pramana we hear in one verse. It's the fountainhead. Again, I'm using that word, but it's a nice word. It's the fountainhead of all philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And it's something that we see in all the writings back to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Basis of everything else. We can use the other books to bring out details. We can use the other books to give inspiration and spice, so to speak, what we should keep grounded in the Bhagavatam. And then he says, in the last or beginning of the last word of the third line, and then in the fourth line, Ishvara sadyo hridyavarudyate trakritibi sushrusubis tatkshanat. Sadhya means immediately. Ishvara hridyavarudyate tra. Here. Actually, I said that he repeated the word atra twice, but he actually repeats it 3 times. In the first line, the second, and in the fourth. In the heart, immediately. And tat kshanat also means, the very last word here means immediately or without delay. Even if one engages, sushrusubis kritibi, if one engages with faith and devotion with this text, then the Lord will be established in the heart immediately. So it may take some time for the full purification to happen, but already the first time that we engage with the Srimad-Bhagavatam, something is going to happen to us. And I'm sure we have this experience, all of us. And the first time I had to do with the Srimad-Bhagavatam was in many years back. I was maybe 14 or something like that. My grandmother had bought the first canto on the street here in my hometown in Finland. She was very unhappy about it. She had bought the Srimad-Bhagavatam and she was very unhappy and angry about it, because what had happened was that a devotee had come up to her and said, "Hello, madam, you have been chosen the loveliest lady in town, so I will give you this book." And he gave the book into her hand and she was very happy. And then he said, "And now you should give a donation." So she gave a donation. She went home with the book, but she was very upset because, not very surprisingly, she felt she had been cheated. But she took the book with her anyway, and she put it in the bookshelf. And I saw the book, and it was blue, and it had these golden suns on it with strange persons within them. And I opened the book, and I couldn't figure out at all what the book was about. Part of it was in Sanskrit, part was in Finnish, and part seemed to be in English as well, because it was His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So it was the strangest book I had ever seen. But there was something very interesting in the book, and that was at the end of the book, there were explanation of the Sanskrit letters, the Devanagari letters. And they looked a little bit like the letters in the appendix of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, when he's explaining about the dwarfish and the elvish writing systems. So I thought that was cool and interesting. So I remember looking at that and trying to figure out how this Krishna word was to be pronounced. I maybe spent half an hour with the book, and then I put it away, and I didn't remember it until much later. But Krishna says here, Sadhyo hridyavarudyate trakritivis sushrushabis tatkshanat. If we engage with this text with devotion and faith, and I didn't really have a devotion at that time. I don't even know if I have it now, but certainly I didn't have any devotion at that time towards the book. And I also didn't have faith towards the Srimad-Bhagavatam. I just thought it was an interesting and strange book. But there's some power in that book that made me pick it up, and it somehow captivated my mind, so that later on I could then go back and properly study it. But it gave me some kind of a seed already that very first time. So when the Srimad-Bhagavatam here says, immediately engaging, the Lord will be established. It's something many people have had experience of. So I'll read the translation again. The full translation of the second verse goes like this, according to Prabhupada. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. So the verse Krishna as being the Tamprapana, or the process of listening, or as Prabhupada delightfully says, the process of oral reception. This is the fundamental process of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Nivedanam. As Prahlad Maharaj says in the 7th canto, bhakti begins with listening, Shravana, whether it means listening through our ears or listening through our eyes when we are reading. Nevertheless, this kind of taking in knowledge is essential on the bhakti path. We often get the impression that it's something that we do in the beginning, but it's actually something that we need to do all the time in all the different phases of bhakti. We see this in Mahaprabhu's life also. The Chaitanya Charitamrita ends with Mahaprabhu listening to right citing Jayadev and Bilava Mangal and so on. The listening is something that is central in the bhakti path from the beginning right up to the very end. And this is true for Srimad-Bhagavatam as well. For the beginner, there are many things to learn in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, but there are also many things for the advanced practitioner to engage with in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. We have here on a Bhagavatam group. It's once a week, and we will read the first chapter of the 10th canto. And it's quite exciting, of course, because everybody knows the 10th canto is the center of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. But reading the Srimad-Bhagavatam systematically, like we have been doing, has been very good on many different levels. And one is that it really showcases how the Srimad-Bhagavatam is the centerpiece, how the 10th canto is the centerpiece of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, but also why it is so extremely important to read the first 9 cantos before you get to the 10th canto. The parts in the 10th canto showcasing Sakya Bhava and Madhurya Bhava, they really stand out when they are contrasted with the more Aishvarik, Shanta and Dasya moods that come out in the previous cantos, such as the love of Dhruva, the love of Prahlad, and so on for the Lord. So the Srimad-Bhagavatam is a book for beginners, but also for advanced practitioners. And it's also, like any classic text, its text gets better by rereading it. You read you go back to the beginning and so on. With the philosopher Gadamer speaks about the hermeneutic cycle or the hermeneutic spiral, where you go into a reading or an understanding of anything with some kind of knowledge from before, some kind of presupposition, which colors your understanding. So if I read a book for the first time, I'm going to understand it through the kind of glasses that I already have, through whatever I know from before. But then when I go back and read it again, my previous understanding will not be simply my kind of own previous understanding, but it will also be colored with my previous understanding of the book. So I will get kind of closer to what the book is actually saying by approaching it again and again. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, who brings an example about that Krishna becomes established in the heart immediately. He says that that's true for those who are qualified. For those who are not so qualified, there's a slight delay. And slight can be a few years or maybe a couple of lifetimes, but just a slight short delay. He already, in his commentary, he already speaks some or writes something about the things that are going to follow, like, for example, the abbreviated form of the Srimad-Bhagavatam in the second canto, the Bhagavatam through the 4 verses. And this he does, of course, to kind of give the reader some kind of a taste already for everything that is going to come. He writes also about this Shivadam, or auspiciousness, really referring to bhakti and to prema, the ultimate form of bhakti. And he quotes some nice verses. For example, one of my favorite verses, Madhura Madhura Metam Mangalam Mangalana Sakala Nigamavalli Satpalam Chitsvarupam Sakridapi Parigitam Shraddhaya Helayava Bhriguvaranaramatram Tarayit Krishna Nama. The name of Krishna is sweeter than the sweetest, the most auspicious of all things auspicious, the highest fruit in the tree of all the Vedas, and it is composed entirely of pure consciousness. O best of the Bhrigus, having once heard it with faith, or even in negligence, it can deliver any human being. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti, he speaks about the importance of the name of the Lord, but there doesn't seem any name of the Lord in this verse. There's only the very general word Ishvara. Wouldn't it be nicer if he would have the name Gopala or Gopinatha or some intimate name of Krishna like that? In a way, yes. But these 3 first verses, they aim at presenting the Srimad-Bhagavatam to a very large audience. The first verse deals with all these Vedantic concepts of consciousness, freedom from illusion, agency, creation, kind of big topics. Similarly, here in the second verse, it's still too early to really go into the rasa properly, but it's not very much too early, because that will happen already in the next verse. in the third verse. But we can see the name of the Lord kind of hidden here. The word tat kshanat, the last word here in this verse, which is a compound word of tat and kshana, which means without delay. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that kshana can also mean a festival. It's another meaning of the word kshana, not as common, but it's still a real meaning of the word kshana. So who is a veritable festival for the mind, a festival for the eyes, a festival for the ears, a festival for the nose and the touch and the taste? What is the being that can offer the most nectar to all of these senses? That is, of course, Krishna. So we can see him hidden like this in the verse. Shivadam. Shiva can also be a name of not only the word Ishvara, which means the controller or the king or the lord, but also in these other words. So these are some things that I wanted to speak about in the second verse. Are there any comments or questions? I think it was breaking up again, but are there any comments or questions on this verse? Shraddha is writing, when I read the beginning of the Bhagavatam, I feel that there is a sense of celebration of its existence. That's very well said. Thank you. A celebration of its existence. Definitely. That's something that's going on here. A kind of proud, kind of calling out, here we have the Srimad-Bhagavatam. A text that is different from other texts. And of course, it's something that you can say, like, this is the best of all books, it's wonderful, ki jai. But the wonderful thing really is here that what we read here is going to be borne out by the text in the next 17,988 verses. It really describes itself. It's not just offering empty words. But yes, that's a good point. Any other comments? Then it is my aha, it's breaking up again. Okay, but if there are no other comments or questions, then it is again my privilege and happiness to thank you, all of you, for attending. I'm sorry for the internet not functioning as it should have. Thank you, Shraddha. Thank you, Brajasundari, Madan Mohan, Omkar, Shamananda. I hope you will have a nice continuation of the week and the weekend. And I hope to see you all soon again. Jai Vishnupad Params Parvrachakacharya Stotra Tashishimad Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Goswamaraj Gurudev ki Jai. Jai Chitana Sangha ki Jai. Jai Gaur Bhaktarinda ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo.
Bhrigupada Prabhu ki jai.
Gaur Bhakta.
Oh.
Bhrigupada.